Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Ocean and Coastal Day of the Race to Zero Dialogues. My name is Christian Teleke. I am the director of the Friends of Ocean Action at the World Economic Forum. Delighted that you could join us, and we do hope that this finds you safe and well wherever you may be in the world. Today is the third day being hosted by the World Economic Forum as a contribution to the Race to Zero Dialogues. Of the many of dialogues that are going on during these 2 weeks, many exciting sessions, and not the least of which is the ocean, and delighted to be able to have a full day of sessions and kicking off today with some very interesting and engaging panelists and remarks to hopefully set you up for the day in participating in some of the other sessions. For those of you who are not familiar with the Race to Zero global campaign, it's an incredible initiative that we'll hear more about from our high-level champions that really is rallying leadership to support the Race to Zero from many cities, over 450 cities, 22 regions, over 1,000 businesses, 45 big investors. And if that wasn't enough, over 550 universities that are really trying to drive for a healthy, resilient, zero carbon recovery that prevents not only future threats, but creates decent jobs and unlocks inclusive, sustainable growth, which I think we all want to aspire to, especially in these times and what COVID has shown us with the relationship between humanity and nature. Certainly the objective of this is to build momentum and shift to a decarbonized economy ahead of COP26, and where governments must strengthen their contributions to the Paris Agreement. And certainly we've been afforded the luxury of time for a year leading into the next COP to really consider some of these issues and really mobilize action, not the least of which is around 2/3 of the planet, the ocean. And for a long time, the ocean perhaps is not considered as part of the mainstream, perhaps out of sight and out of mind in many discussions, not the least of which has been in the climate. And thanks to many of you on the line and champions that are taking this forward, are raising this higher on the agenda. We saw this most recently in COP25 that was hosted by Chile, calling it the Blue COP, really bringing the ocean into the climate domain, and I think we're all getting very excited about the potential for COP26. I think many of you may not realize the extent the ocean role has in regulating our climate, but has an enormous influence on weather patterns across the globe. And we're seeing this time and time again, the influence that the ocean is having on our climate. I think, hopefully you'll be aware that the ocean has absorbed approximately 90% of the excess heat that we're producing, and over 30% of the carbon generated from human activities, which are dampening much of the impacts that we'd otherwise experience on land. However, we do know that the ocean is in trouble, and this certainly is compromising its ability to withstand the impacts of climate change, and certainly to continue to provide the resources that support local livelihoods, valuable infrastructure, national security, global economies, our health, etc. And so there's an intimate linkage here between ocean health and planetary health, and indeed human health, that we certainly need to strengthen. The good news, hopefully you all have seen, is that recent research commissioned by the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy found that ocean-based climate action can play a much bigger role in shrinking the world's carbon footprint that was previously thought. In this analysis, it was shown that it could deliver up to a fifth That's 21% or 11 gigatons of CO2 of annual greenhouse gas emission cuts needed by 2020 to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. And if you think about this, part of this would be to move to ocean-based renewable energy technologies such as offshore wind, wave, tidal, etc., would be displacing coal-fired power plants. And the total mitigation potential for the sector could be equal to taking over 1 billion cars off the road per year. That's 1 billion cars off the road per year. So it really behooves us to really think about the ocean and the role the ocean can play in combating climate change. And indeed, we'll hear more about this from our very distinguished panelists that we have here today. We're really fortunate that the Race to Zero dialogues considered that we could be able to reach a broader audience and allowing us to raise this issue with more governments and industry and communities around the world so that we can better understand the state of the ocean and the need for putting this firmly in the heart of the agenda of climate change going forward. It certainly is an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to call for the potential, not think about necessarily the impacts, but think about the solutions, how we can mitigate climate change impacts and strengthen ocean resilience, as well as indeed our own resilience to climate change. So we need to think about really the connection, as I mentioned earlier, about humanity, people, economy. They are connected and we need to consider it as such. We would really like to thank our high-level champions for hosting this Ocean and Coastal Day event in the Race to Zero Dialogues. Nigel Topping and Gonzalo Munoz, I hope you all, if you haven't met them and get to know them, I encourage you to do so. They have an enormous amount of energy and drive to really see these issues come to the forefront. And we want to empower them. We want to support them. We want to help them to really move this agenda along. We are entering into some new territory, we hope, where the world, indeed globally, and some of the big powers are going to start really perhaps changing their views and really embracing the solutions of what climate change, towards climate change. So with that, I am delighted to welcome Nigel and Gonzalo to kick things off with some opening remarks. So gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Christian, and good morning, everyone. As Christian said, welcome to our fourth day of the Race to Zero Dialogues. As he said, the third one at the WEF House. Today is our blue day and totally connected, as Christian said, to the blue COP, to COP25, but heading to COP26. We're now opening our Oceans and Coastal Zone Day, starting, of course, by thanking the Friends of Ocean Action, the World Economic Forum, the Blue Climate Initiative, and the Ocean and Climate Platform for putting this critical topic of oceans and coastal zones in the Race to Zero emissions. Today, we will explore how oceans and coastal zones can and must help us accelerate climate action, enhance communities' resilience, and contribute to our efforts to build this healthy, resilient, zero-carbon future that we are building from the non-state actors' perspective, helping nations, helping the parties to increase their ambition, to increase their action, noticing that there are so many capacities being contributed from the oceans and coastal zones sector. Today, we have no doubt that investing in sustainable blue economy activities can be one of the most economically efficient means of recovering from the global pandemic. We have to tackle climate change through the increment of the health of oceans. And we have to frame the vision of today's theme and draw on the oceans and coastal zone climate action pathway that have set out the blueprint of how to make this vision a reality.
Thanks, Gonzalo. And I think at the heart of the climate action pathways is this idea of systemic change, that the kind of transformations we're talking about require actors. They require people across along value chains, policymakers, civil society, cities, investors, all to change in concert to play their role. And that's why the idea of the pathways is so crucial in driving what we call the ambition loop, so that as well as the long-term vision and long-term goals, we have very specific actions which people are going to take in the next 5 years. And our intention is to get to Glasgow with as many of you as possible in the Race to Zero and sending very clear signals about what you are already doing so that governments get that message and that we can include action on oceans into national mitigation and adaptation plans. Mainly here to listen today, but some of the things that I'm really looking forward to are hearing more about the role of healthy ecosystems in storing carbon, whether it's mangrove forests, seagrass meadows, or saltwater marshes being protected and restored. And as well as storing carbon, we know, as Christian alluded to, there's many economic and human benefits in terms of flood protection, storm protection, and healthy and sustainable livelihoods. Also looking forward to hearing more about the marine linked industries, whether it's offshore energy, shipping. I mean, some great progress in the Getting to Zero coalition, really, and getting a really clear roadmap together for the shipping industry to get to zero, and interesting collaborations like CBOS, bringing together leading fishing industry players that could perhaps up their ambition to commit to net zero. So really looking forward to learning a lot more from all the stakeholders on track for an oceans race to zero in the rest of today. Gonzalo.
Yeah, man. And as you said, I mean, it's time there's no room for a siloed mindset to solve challenges like the ones related to our topic. Radical collaboration between different stakeholders and different sectors, absolutely critical. And oceans and coastal zones are one very concrete way to set that logic, right? When you see the connection between oceans and energy, oceans and transport, oceans and food, that shows us the need of setting the radical collaboration. So we are, as you said, seeing great advances in transport and sustainable fuel. We also see the need of investing and put capital towards ending overfishing, restoring mangroves, expanding offshore wind, decarbonizing shipping. All of that will require investment with this intention of solving the climate crisis related to ocean. We need to start this today. We cannot wait for 2050. We need to take this into a transformative action. And we know, for example, how much of tidal facilities and offshore wind farms will play an important role in the global clean electricity mix. But as I said before, we need to scale up the investment and the vision to create this future now. When it comes to job creation connected to the COVID-19 crisis, all marine-linked industries should provide healthy, sustainable jobs for local communities, as Kristen mentioned. In this moment when job recovery is so critical, all marine-linked industries should contribute to a recovery from coronavirus in the short term and to create our zero carbon economy in the long term. We need to globally invest in nature-based solutions, and we know that oceans provide us with numerous nature-based solutions to climate change. It's a perfect connection between climate and diversity, right? So we can say also that the ocean crisis and the climate crisis are just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, thanks, Gonzalo. Just Christian, a last thought, and then hand back to you. We've called these 2 weeks the Race to Zero dialogue. So yes, the emphasis is on the race to zero, the specific actions that we can urgently take to get on track. But I also just like to point to the importance of the word dialogue. We're all trained to debate ideas and to win arguments. And the word debate etymologically comes from the same root as batter. It's a confrontation, a debate with a winner and a loser. So we're really looking forward to dialogues, which is an opportunity to slow down a little bit, not feel the need to be right and to win an argument, but to really concentrate on listening to each other, and in particular notice where we disagree, because in the areas where we disagree, when we listen to each other, there's a huge opportunity for learning, and it's only if we learn together, it's only as we learn together that we'll be able to make these systems transformations that we need. So really looking forward to learning a lot. It's an incredible day you guys have put together, and look forward to working with you to make sure that we can tell the story in Glasgow of a world with a clear plan and decisive action already being taken to win the ocean track of the race to zero. Thanks, Christian.
Well, fantastic, Nigel and Gonzalo. What, as you can see, hopefully people on the line, what terrific energy and inspiring words these two gentlemen have. And I think, you know, it's a great way to remind us, Nigel, about, you know, this in terms of dialogue. You know, this is very much about opening doors and bridging, you know, building bridges and establishing relationships and conversations where it's not just about, you know, driving home, you know, and battering people with statistics and you know, but it's really thinking about those solutions and that we are in this together. And so I think I'm hoping that certainly over the course of the day, we'll be able to provide insights and deliver perhaps some ideas, really concrete ideas of where we can have a commonality of purpose and meaning and understanding that we are all in this together. And in fact, we can address this together as a great lead into COP26 next year. I would also suggest, if I may, you know, while we still have Gonzalo and Nigel here, that and maybe perhaps a plea that we use upcoming ocean events and as sort of milestones to keep this conversation going and keeping others engaged, to remind people the importance of the ocean. So we certainly have a great bill leading into COP26, and that the important that sort of governments and parties are hearing the importance that the ocean plays in our daily lives. And it's not just one set of people that are driving that forward. So we're certainly looking to you for helping us with that. So again, thank you so much.
Plea heard, Christian. We look forward to working with you to keep that drumbeat going. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we have got an incredible panel for you right now. I worked out that they are spanning 12 time zones. And this is called dedication, folks. We've got Daniela Fernandez, who is just past 2 o'clock in the morning for her. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, doing great work for a number of years now on innovators, really mobilizing youth communities. We'll hear from her in a moment. We then have Kim Kupanas, who's the Global Ambassador for B-Lab. I reckon it's about 3 o'clock in the morning for her. And then moving swiftly into Europe, probably no introduction needed, but I'm going to do so anyway. Hans Otto Portner, who's the co-chair working group 2 of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, instrumental in the report on the ocean and cryosphere that was launched last year, that hopefully many of you saw. And then finally, and by no means least, Angelique Pompano, the Chief Executive Officer of Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, SECAT, who is situated in the Seychelles mid-afternoon for you there. Delighted to welcome you all and that you could join us for this very important discussion, indeed kickoff for this day of ocean and coastal discussions. So with that, maybe perhaps Hans Otto, can I come to you first? You clearly have been at the forefront of discussing and raising the issue amongst governments, mobilizing many scientists around the world to really make sure that our scientific understanding of the role the ocean plays within climate change is clearly understood and indefensible, you know, almost as much as possible. And I think, you know, and I'm sure there are many things that keep you up at night. And I do wonder whether you could maybe say, well, what are those things that are keeping you up at night? What is your biggest concern that you have with respect to the ocean and climate at this moment? If you just would unmute yourself there. There you go.
Just to say thanks a lot, Christian, and hello, everybody. If you ask me for my biggest concern, we have been praising the role of the ocean in climate regulation and especially stabilization. And that role is at stake because it depends on healthy ecosystems. I mean, we have drivers in the ocean, which I would call the climate drivers in the ocean, which are ocean warming, ocean acidification, and both of them are sort of the other side of the coin of this climate regulation service the ocean provides. And then we have oxygen loss from the ocean due to warming. And where these three drivers combine, we call them a deadly trio. If they challenge the organism so much that they are giving up, that they are going extinct in their respective in the respective places. And I'm going to this extreme because it has happened in Earth history. It has happened during mass extinction events in Earth history, and the fossil record tells us about these interactions. So in a way, our current climate crisis is comparable to these paleo climate crises, but it's happening much faster than back then, where it took hundreds and thousands of years to develop to the extent then to take effect on the organisms. So we are faster. We haven't yet, on humans' time scales, we haven't yet reached the dimension of those past crises, but this should be a warning sign. There are tipping points to be surpassed for healthy ecosystems. And for one of them, we have already surpassed it, which is the warm water corals. And we should stabilize the climate, and with that stabilize the ocean and preserve biodiversity and preserve its capacity to help us, because it connects everything on the planet.
Indeed. And that certainly is these warning signals clearly are there, and that I think it's really important that that message of the speed at which the change is happening. And in previous, we're moving beyond geological scales to the speed at which the change of the environment is extraordinary. And so obviously that is something that we need to make clear, that speed of change. Yeah, just maybe if I come back to you on this, Hans Otto, if I may. I'm curious to get your sense of the sort of the connection. I mean, you talked about coral reefs. Could you give us give a sense for those that are watching who may not necessarily make the connection between these ecosystems and people, and actually there are real terms, so some may think, okay, we lose a coral reef, it's not going to affect me, but it's quite the contrary, no?
Well, it certainly is quite a contrary, because it's a global system. It spans the belt around in the tropics around the globe. It's virtually found on every continent, if you so wish, and it is supporting livelihoods. It is one of the gems of biodiversity on the planet, and it's showing us to what extent a system that is providing services to humankind is losing its capacity. It's protecting coastlines from storm effects. It's providing fish and animal protein from the ocean to dependent communities. And these are usually communities in developing countries. The capacities there to adapt to these changes are limited. And it's the whole world should be concerned about the tropics, because one of the first consequences, and we see this already with the shifts that are ongoing. I mean, ocean life is shifting, is moving to higher latitudes. And the net effect of this will be a clearing of the tropics from biodiversity. And this biodiversity reduction there, we see in the ocean, but we also see it on land. It's starting to happen. We are entering what we call the sixth mass extinction event on the Earth. And there's a rich human community that is depending on those ecosystem services in those areas. And that's another urgent call for stabilizing climate and maintaining those ecosystem services to the extent possible.
Yeah, and I think that really sort of speaks to the point that Gonzalo was talking about, that we can't treat these necessarily in silos. We need to break down those silos. We need to understand the interconnections between these systems and the challenges we face. And indeed, Daniela, someone who's been at the at the forefront of really thinking about acknowledging that there are some challenges that are being faced by the next generation. But indeed, what you've tried to do with the Sustainable Ocean Alliance is really shift to, okay, we accept that there's a challenge, but we want to then prioritize solutions and mobilize, communities to really rise to the challenge, shall we say, of these solutions, and particularly the youth community. And so from you, what, in your opinion, is needed to effectively tackle the challenges that you were facing and that Hans Otto had outlined during this session?
Thanks, Christian. So I'll give you three very important, challenges that we have and solutions for that matter. So first of all, young people globally have this deep sense of urgency that has never been felt in the past. So, when we're thinking about the restoration and the health of our ocean, our goal is to restore the health of our ocean in our lifetime. And so as we're having these conversations leading up to COP26, we want to make sure that world leaders understand that the 10, 20, 30-year-old milestone timelines that worked for them in the past won't work for us anymore. We really need to be a lot more deliberate and intentional in setting shorter timeframes and milestones so that we can tackle these problems. So that's one, just having a deep sense of urgency of this generation and making sure that that is translated to world leaders at large. Number two, we're also seeing the importance of being cross-disciplinary and being more inclusive in who we're allowing to play in this space and who is able to provide solutions to this space. Oftentimes, we saw the ocean space as an area where you could only enter if you had a marine biology degree or you had a PhD, but that's not the case anymore. We have young people globally that are accountants, that are artists, that are scuba divers, that are professionals in their own right that want to contribute. So how can we enable them to contribute? And the only way to do so is by helping them create solutions in their own backyard and using their skill sets and passions. And the third thing I'll say is just we desperately need an injection of capital into the space. And when we look at innovation, at SOE, we look at the whole spectrum, right? We have in the ideation phase, we have so many young people building grassroots projects that need micro funding. And that spans all the way to, we have companies that are working on R&D for very innovative projects and they need millions and millions of dollars. But we don't have enough funders in this space to satisfy all those areas. So that's what we're trying to do, is trying to build that understanding and a dialogue with investors and with funders to help them see that we need to tackle every single area of investment in the ocean space.
That's fantastic setup. I'm going to come to Angelique in a second, but there was something that you mentioned there. A couple of things you mentioned, Daniela, that I think is really important. You talked about raising ambition, and I think that would really echo with Gonzalo and Nigel. About really, their kind of daily mantra, when they get out of bed and think, how are we going to raise ambition and what kind of communities can we raise ambition? I think so it speaks to the Race to Zero dialogues. The urgency, let's not wait to 2050 to start thinking about this. Let's start thinking about it today. So by the time we get to 2050, we're in a good position. And again, really echoing what both Nigel and Gonzalo have said. And I love what you said about cross-disciplinary. When I was talking, we were talking briefly there with Hans Otto, we talked about breaking down these silos. And that inclusive bit, you don't need a marine biology degree. I get lots of young people coming through my door saying, well, I don't have a marine biology degree. Well, you know what? That doesn't matter. You're coming from business, you're coming from psychology, there's a role for everybody. And our message is that you're saying is the ocean is everybody's business and therefore everybody should participate. So I think that's sort of the great, but what you landed on there, and this is where I'm going to come to Angelique, and we'll come back to you again in a moment, Daniela. Angelique, Daniela talked about injecting finance, and how do we got no shortage of solutions, no shortage of enthusiasm and energy, but we need to have the finance that appropriately meets the scale and the challenge that's being faced by the ocean, so we can link into this climate change issues. You have been, you're at the heart of this with a leading example of the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. Reaching your 5-year anniversary. Congratulations. That is fantastic to see that you're moving from strength to strength, and really thinking about mobilizing, resources. And so Angelique, what do you think has perhaps led to some of the successes and drive for investment that you're achieving through SECAT, the Seychelles Conservation Climate Adaptation Trust, over these past 5 years?
Hi, everyone. Well, greetings from the Seychelles. And yes, I am actually in the middle of the 5th anniversary celebration. So if you hear some buzzing, we've got school children visiting the exhibition. So with regards to what are the key pieces that has led to, a debt for nature swap, a sovereign blue bond, I definitely have to go back to partnerships. It's been the fact that we've had so many actors wanting to partner with the Seychelles government, with SECAT, to be able to materialize this. Because we know as a small island developing state, we have our own constraints in terms of resources, in terms of technical expertise. But it's the fact that we've had so many excellent partners come through. So for example, with the Debt for Nature swap, we had the Nature Conservancy. We had the Nature Conservancy. We had, with the Sovereign Blue Bond, we had 3 private investors, the World Bank, the Global Environment Facility. And now with our latest endeavor, which is a mapping of seagrass meadows across the entire exclusive economic zone of Seychelles. I hope you can still hear me.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Love the background noise. Fantastic. It really speaks to what we're talking about. You know,
Absolutely.
getting involved. Love it. Go ahead.
Now we're currently mapping seagrass meadows across the entire exclusive economic zone of Seychelles, where we will be able to actually say by the end of this project how many gigatons of carbon that these seagrass meadows are storing. And the Seychelles could not have done this alone. Right? We know this. The Seychelles could not have done this alone. It's really been partnership, but really a strong message to countries is that you need to show the ambition. You need to show that political ambition. Otherwise, the partners will not approach you. And for me, I think those 2 things have been particularly key. Just to echo what Danielle has said, you know, it is everybody's business. And here we've seen private sector, philanthropy, governments, multilateral organization really come in and to support these initiatives. And then finally, you know, it boils down to really everyone believing and understanding the main cause and getting behind it. Yeah, partnerships are key.
Fantastic, Angelique, and what an appropriate soundtrack to have in the background there of children and getting involved and mobilizing. Wonderful to see that. And I think what you said about partnerships is absolutely right. You know, we cannot go at this alone. So hopefully, you know, people are starting to see some patterns here about, you know, ambition, urgency, inclusivity, partnerships. And you know, this is hopefully a very nice echo for Gonzalo and Nigel as they're listening to this and thinking about, you know, their planning going forward. You know, Angelique, you mentioned about, you know, the private sector, and on the line, we've got Kim Kupanas, who's the global ambassador for the B Lab. And, you know, Kim, you know, I know that, you know, you are someone who is passionate for the environment, you're passionate for people, and you're passionate for business. That is clear. And I think that wasn't the case, you probably would not be getting up at 3 a.m. So we're delighted to have you here. And you've heard, I think, everybody talk, you know, just to varying degrees about partnerships and the importance for, you know, the role of the private sector in business. And I know probably what you're hearing maybe is some of it is new to you and hopefully energizing for you for 2/3 of the planet. But you know, what is the role of the private sector, you know, in this and really rolling up their sleeves and going beyond the talk and really doing the walking in this instance?
Totally. Thank you so much, Christian. It's really a pleasure to be here. And, you know, as Danielle and you both said, the ocean is everybody's business. And, you know, businesses have a unique role to play, not only because it's bad for business when there's floods and storm surges and hurricanes and tsunamis, but as Gonzalo pointed out, there's enormous opportunity, jobs to be created, and economic vitality to come from investing in the blue economy. But, you know, the role of business, as my 10-year-old would say, is ginormous. The opportunities for scaling innovations, for the kinds of blue economy investments really are huge. And, you know, if businesses choose to do something for the oceans for no other reason than business opportunity, great. But I would argue that they're uniquely culpable. You know, you look at all of the stats in terms of plastic pollution and, you know, most of the challenges to the ocean right now being caused by business. So, you know, dying oceans are bad for business, and it's really important that businesses are taking responsibility for the kind of impacts that they're having there. And there's so much that businesses are doing, but I would argue it's not happening fast enough. They're not doing enough of it. But in terms of what they can do, to really oversimplify it, businesses need to stop dumping bad stuff into the ocean and start pulling bad stuff out of the ocean. There's some really great examples from within the business community, and specifically the business community that I represent, of businesses that are doing that kind of very aggressive, innovative work to heal our oceans. And, you know, in addition to just understanding what those impacts are, it's easy to think that if you're not making ocean related products, or you're not in a coastal community, that dying oceans or the ocean emergency is not impacting your business. That's just really a false notion, because when these kind of impacts happen to ocean communities, and you know, you start to see these kind of economic impacts, the ripple effects on your business and your supply chains is really enormous. So there's a lot of upside and a lot of downside, and reason for businesses to be invested in healing our oceans.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and hopefully that you know, that's the sort of language that I'm hoping, you know, that we're all hoping is really starting to resonate, you know, with the business community. I think, you know, sort of picking up on that and maybe reflecting on what Daniela said. And Daniela, maybe if I can come back to you on this. You know, you heard Kim talk about, you know, this really clear and cogent case for, you know, for business to be involved, and you know, should be less about putting things in, but more about putting, you know, perhaps, you know, putting things, you know, pulling things out of the ocean, but investing in the ocean the same way, because it's good, you know, good for people, good for business and climate. I mean, Daniela, I mean, you've clearly, you know, laid down the flag, as it were, in terms of saying, you know, urgency, inclusivity. You know, is this resonating with some of the businesses that you're speaking to? I mean, are you seeing the uptake that I think sort of Kim is talking about there?
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that it's even important to take a step back and for us to realize how important and special the moment in time that we're in right now. Because when you look at the past 100 years, when you think about the marine industry, the ocean industry, the mentality has been all around exploitation and exploration. And that was it. That was what shipping was all about. That was what any industry in the ocean was about. And now we're entering this era of disruption, and disruption to regenerate and make our ocean sustainable. So we're definitely seeing the shift, not only in entrepreneurs and young people in the ocean space, but also, to Kim's point, in business leaders, and seeing that they're not going to be around the next, you know, few years if they don't change their practices. So it's truly been fascinating to see how there is disruption coming in from the entrepreneurial side, but also seeing how corporates are meeting entrepreneurs halfway and having those conversations of how can we work together and how can we implement different solutions. And Christian, the other thing I want to point out is this idea of holistic impact that in the past hasn't been really a norm. And when I mean holistic impact, I mean, when we have, for example, an entrepreneur building a solution to tackle plastic in the ocean, they're not just thinking about how do we prevent plastic from entering the ocean. They're also thinking about how does the material I'm using, my example is Lollyware, a seaweed-based technology company. Not only are they preventing plastic from entering the ocean, but they're also drawing down carbon by growing their own seaweed farms, right? The same thing goes for another company that is working on tidal energy, that is not only thinking about how can we make alternative energy, but they're thinking about how can we add IoT devices to our technology to collect data in the ocean space. So we're seeing such a mix of cross-disciplinary understandings of how can we measure impact and have a positive impact on the ocean, not just from my industry, but across the board.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really important. Again, about thinking it, the more holistic approach and integrated approach across sectors. What I want to do now is I want to sort of pose a final question, you know, to you all, to, you know, and, you know, cast your minds ahead. It is in a year's time. Perhaps we've had COP26, and there've been lots of discussions. And, you know, what would you like to see? And this is perhaps a little bit of, you know, kind of you know, raising ambition, you know, for Nigel and Gonzalo. But what would you like to see, or what would you consider a successful outcome from COP26? You know, recognizing that, you know, we can't have our cake and eat it right away. You know, as you know, Nigel said, it's about having dialogue, it's about opening doors, and you know, at the same time wanting to have the urgency. I'd love to get your thoughts, and I'll come to you first, Hans Otto, if I may. You know, very briefly, what does success look like coming out of COP26 for you? in a year's time?
Well, success at COP26 would be a dedicated vote by all countries to keep to the climate targets that we have laid out in the 1.5 report. This includes for all countries to dedicate to the restoration of ecosystems, exploiting the co-benefits that they entail in terms of carbon storage, preserving biodiversity, and one that we may not have in mind for the ocean, but it's important on land, actually preserving and protecting us from future pandemics. So a shift in mentality to nature conservation and restoration. And all countries should include the oceans in their nationally determined contributions,
Yeah.
and exploit the potential. In addition to protecting the oceans, consider in their conservation measures the capacity of the oceans to help us with the stabilization of climate, rebuilding natural resources where we have them exploited, and really push for a trend to stop the current shift in baseline that we are seeing from the tropics to the poles.
Yeah. Well, wise words, Handano. Thank you so much for that. And I think that really speaks to hopefully raising the bar, as Nigel has just put into the chat, and really thinking about reflecting on the year that we've had, and the times to come, and in how we can perhaps build much more resiliency into the system as we address the impacts of climate change, both on land and in the sea. Angelique, for you, what does success look like, or what's that ambition? What would you like to see coming out of COP26?
I'd like to see a better understanding by countries of nature-based solutions and the role that oceans can play and the actions that they can take. I think what we've seen so far is not enough ambition within the NDCs that have been submitted so far. And I would take this opportunity to call on countries, I don't want to wait to Glasgow to see success. I think we have a real opportunity to seek success in those revised NDCs and still continue to aim for the temperature goal. And that would be my hope, that we are focused on nature-based solutions within the NDCs.
Fantastic. Good words, and perhaps a natural segue into Daniela. Let's not wait around. Let's raise the urgency. Daniela, what does success look like, according to Angelique, maybe tomorrow, but perhaps next year after COP26?
So in my opinion, what I would love to see happen is for governments to develop a blueprint as to how citizens can be mobilized. Because, after many of these meetings, governments feel as if they're on them to deliver these targets, which it is, but they don't give its citizens enough of an opportunity to contribute. And right now, what we're seeing a mobilization and even a movement of people wanting to give, and they're hungry for it. So I would encourage each government to put together a mobilization campaign for their own citizens to take a part in helping us reach these targets and these milestones, and of course, including the ocean in every one of these conversations.
Yeah, well, what a great idea of just really coming up with. I think often people sometimes feel that these big existential challenges that the world faces at the moment are too much, and I think especially with COVID at the moment, you sit here and think, I don't know where to turn, I don't know what to do, and maybe that mobilization should be thinking more about local communities, and that we all have a role to play in some way, and that if we add it up, we might actually get somewhere. And it kind of speaks to this point of that the ocean is everybody's business, and maybe rounding off, Kim, with you, reflecting on what you heard, and what does success look like for you, coming out of COP26?
Yeah, well, I'll just say that I'm so excited for Glasgow. The B Corp community was really proud to join the Race to Zero at COP25 in Madrid. And we came to Madrid with over 500 B corporations committed to net zero by 2030. And we're hoping to show up in Glasgow with more than half of the global B Corp community. That's over 1,700 B corporations, these companies around the world that are really pace setters and are businesses that can show others of every size and sector that it's possible to get to a zero carbon business model. So we hope to bring over 1,700 of them with us to Glasgow. and to lift up their stories, you know, and to the conversation we're having today, I hope that we have a really robust dialogue and we've lifted up the conversation around the vital role that businesses have in healing our oceans and in preserving and protecting coastal communities and their oceans for the decades ahead.
Well, fantastic words to end this panel on. And Kim, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that there you are in the heartland, in the middle of the United States, and you've got a fantastic coastline image behind you on your wall. Very apropos and a good reminder that we've had during this session. Listen, it's been terrific to hear your energy, your enthusiasm, you know, real confidence, you know, with the science. We know what to do. We just need to get down and do with it, and hopefully. Certainly, Hans Otto, hopefully you're energized by your fellow panelists that, you know, there's a real to-do, let's get this done, and really try to, you know, spend this next year and beyond, indeed, raising that level of ambition and raising that bar. So I thank you so much for spending this time with us, getting up in the wee hours. It really, it is incredible and really demonstrates your commitment, you know, to this issue. So with that, I wish our panelists a good evening, a good afternoon, and indeed a very early morning to you. So we thank you again, and hopefully those on the lines will be interested in contacting you and perhaps continue the discussion, and look forward to engaging with you going forward into you know, COP26 next year. With that, we're gonna round off with some, you know, closing remarks from, again, some extremely distinguished members who've been, you know, involved with this. Not the least of which is Vladimir Rabinin, who is the Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission and the Assistant Director General of UNESCO, dialing in from Paris. Vladimir, delighted that you could join us on the line. You are leading the charge on the Decade of Ocean Science, launching next year. I think everyone's excited about it. And really importantly, when you read it, it's the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. It's connecting it in and making ocean science relevant to everything we do. And hopefully those on the line will have heard the importance of science and connecting it in. So Vladimir, we'd love some brief remarks from you on how, you know, how is this, the science, you know, what it is connecting in, you know, to this issue and really driving this agenda forward.
Thank you, Christian, also for inviting me to speak to you, you know, and as I used to be a real scientist, now I'm a bureaucrat, but at the same time, I believe that I kept some systematic thinking. And I think we need to look at the decade in the lens of what is happening in the world. So, climate crisis, we all know that it exists. In 2016, the World Ocean Assessment of United Nations said there is also a crisis in the ocean. We are running out of time to start managing the ocean sustainably. But there are some good news. So I would like to thank Hans Otto Portner for leading the work of IPCC and coming up with the special report on ocean cryosphere and changing climate. I think it was a game changer in the process in the United Nations Framing Convention on Climate Change. Now the door is open to the ocean. After in 2015, the Paris Agreement, the negotiators agreed to include the ocean in the agreement. And I would like to describe to you the solution, just probably skipping several steps. The solution to us is that we need to have the ocean that is managed like we claim that we're able to manage the land, like we can claim that we're able to manage the cities with the running water, electricity, roads, traffic lights, and things like this. Ocean needs to be managed based on science and needs to be managed by people who are ocean and climate literate. So this, of course, requires science. But the current investment into science is of the order of 2 degrees from the overall investment into science and technology. And you started this session by stating that we have 70% of the area of the planet is the ocean, and only 2% of science funding goes there. So if we learn how to manage the ocean, and you already, Christian, outlined 5 areas that will be renewables, that will be decarbonization of transport, management of ecosystems, food, dealing with the food on the sea. You can easily imagine that all things are quite science intensive. So In 50 days from now, indeed, the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is starting. The vision of the decade is science we need for the ocean we want. And I already said that we would like to have managed ocean. One of the challenges of the decade is so-called climate and ocean nexus. And we hope that we'll be able to come up with good solutions, also in terms of adaptation and mitigation to climate change, with good spillover effects in dealing with reducing the poverty, reducing the food shortages, improving health of the ocean, developing sustainable ocean economy. So basically, there is a vision, there is a possibility to use science and change the tide so the ocean becomes healthy and climate solutions are also visible. So on the 15th of October, the IOC of UNESCO, which is the home of ocean science in the United Nations system, came up with a call for action. This call will be open for the programs of the decade until 15th of January. So I invite everyone to think about this. Please go to the website Ocean Decade and think how we can design now the science that will be really opening the door for all the solutions that you already outlined, Christian, in your introductory talk. Message is that it is possible to solve the climate issue, the ocean issue, and we need good science for that. And it is really what we are doing now together with the whole world. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you so much for that, Vladimir. And I would have to say that we need more bureaucrats who understand the science. You are a gem, and we need more of your likes to be in the positions that you're in. So delighted to have your words, and very important. You know, as you said, you know, we need to have more investment in the science, in solutions. I think we heard that from certainly from our colleagues, and really. You know, getting others involved. You know, it doesn't have to be the purview of scientists alone. You know, we are going to mobilize many more communities that can be involved, certainly in the decade of ocean science going forward. And that hopefully will help the arguments or the cases that people like Daniela and Kim and Angelique are working on to mobilize their communities and get them excited about the art of possible. So we certainly look forward to engaging you. I encourage others to learn more about the decade and how you can get involved, because it's just not about you know, ocean science. It's about what ocean science can do for you and make our lives better, and our economies richer, and certainly our planet healthier. So again, Vladimir, thank you so much for spending the time with us, and we'll look forward to working with you further in the coming year and beyond in the decade. Ladies and gentlemen, I am now delighted to introduce our final speaker, who is the Minister for the UK government, who is leading the charge on on COP26. Lord Goldsmith has been an ocean champion for many years, and he is very kindly offered, who couldn't join us in person, but has very kindly offered a video for some remarks. So may I ask my colleagues to play the video, please?
Thank you. As an island nation, the ocean matters a great deal to the UK, so it's a real pleasure to be part of making this extended run-up to COP26 count. And if it weren't for the pandemic, today we'd likely be reflecting on the closing of the UN Biodiversity Conference in Kunming, and we'd be welcoming the world to the Climate Conference in Glasgow. And it all seems like another age now, and I think in many respects it is. Coronavirus has changed everything. It is itself likely the consequence of our abuse of nature, but we know it will be dwarfed by the impacts of climate breakdown and environmental degradation, land and sea. A third of marine mammals are, we're told, now threatened with extinction. Half of the world's seabirds are already affected by the rising tide of ocean plastic, and almost 2/3 of our coastal wetlands are degraded, critical habitats for migratory species right across the world. Now, the ocean is where life began, essential for all life on Earth, full of wonders that we've barely begun to understand, and we all depend on it for air to breathe, food, resources, the flow of global trade. But for some, its incalculable importance is much more direct and immediate. and millions of people, as well as quarter of marine species, rely for food and shelter on the coral reefs that are set to disappear in our warmer, more acidic seas. Over 1 billion people depend on fish as their main source of protein. The world's poorest people depend most on the free but rarely valued services that nature provides. And as they begin to fail, it is they who are hit hardest. By destroying ocean health and taking the world's great fisheries to their very brink, we're undermining our foundations. And turning this trajectory around is objectively, therefore, the principal challenge of our age. In addition to the many deaths, coronavirus has driven 100 million people back into base poverty. And even those small island developing states that have somehow managed to avoid the virus itself have nevertheless seen their economies battered. So the whole world now is having to rebuild. And if there's a silver lining to this pandemic, it's the commitment from countries all the way around the world to build back greener and to build back better, not in a box-ticking sense. It means making sustainability the lens through which all decisions ultimately are made. Now, we've seen great progress in the technological transition to low carbon. Zero-emission vehicles are on the cusp now of going mainstream. The cost of renewables has plummeted, and investment in renewables now exceeds investment in new fossil fuel capacity. But despite the fact that there is no pathway to net zero emissions or the sustainable development goals, without nature protection and nature recovery on a massive scale, we've made very little progress with nature. Nature-based solutions could provide around a third of the cost-effective solutions that we need now, like mangroves we're helping to restore from Indonesia to the Caribbean, to store carbon, support fisheries, and protect coastal communities. Yet nature-based solutions attract just 3% of global climate finance. As COP26 presidents, we're determined to put nature at the heart of the world's response to climate change. So we're committed to doubling our own international climate finance, and we'll be spending a significant chunk of that increase on nature. And others need to do similarly. And that is important not just for land, but for sea as well. We've relied on our ocean to regulate our changing climate. It's absorbed a quarter of carbon emissions and 90% of the excess heat since caused by human activity. But there's only so long that it can continue to act as a buffer. The UK is set to launch a new £500 million Blue Planet Fund early next year to help eligible countries protect their marine resources and reduce poverty. And our Blue Belt program of marine protected areas around our beautiful overseas territories is on track now to protect an area larger than India. We launched the Global Ocean Alliance last year, inviting every country to join our campaign to protect at least 30% of the world's ocean in marine protected areas by 2030. At the UN a few weeks ago, more than 75 world leaders signed up to an ambitious, radical even, a Leaders' Pledge for Nature. It's a commitment to put nature and biodiversity on a road to recovery by 2030. I understand that declaration fatigue exists, but this pledge feels different, more urgent. It explicitly recognizes the failure of past agreements. It explicitly invites people to judge signatories on the basis of how they set about honoring its commitments. And it explicitly recognizes the need to agree a new, legally binding agreement on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in those areas beyond national jurisdiction that make up most of our ocean. I'm proud that the UK played a big role in strengthening that pledge, insisting on the strongest possible language. But the challenge now, of course, is to turn those powerful words into action. Good luck with the rest of your discussions, and thank you.
Thank you, Zach Goldsmith, Minister of State, Foreign and Common Office, the Department of International Development, and the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs for the UK government, and Ocean Champion. If you don't get inspired and enthused and energized by that, I don't know what will. great words from the minister, and that having that commitment for the UK government, and hopefully giving you the confidence that the ocean will be a main part of COP26 going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an interesting hour to have spent with you. Fascinating panelists, hopefully getting you inspired about the art of potential, the solutions that are there, and indeed that you need to be a part of this. We have talked about the importance of science, the urgency, the inclusivity, the partnerships that are going forward, the role of business can play, the decade of ocean science and getting involved with that, and indeed rounding this off by the commitment that governments are willing to make as far as the ocean concerned. We have a great day ahead of you. I hope that you'll be able to join us. We have 3 other sessions today on fighting climate change, ocean as part of a solution, nature-based solutions. Another session on innovating for sustainable ocean technologies to tackle climate change. You heard a lot about the role of technology and solutions. And then finally, rounding off the day with a resilient ocean for global recovery. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Race to Zero campaign. Thank you to my colleagues at the World Economic Forum, working tirelessly in the background to bring you this very important opening session of the Ocean and Coastal Day of the Race to Zero dialogues. We hope that you stay well, and we look forward to keeping the ocean on the climate agenda and working with us. So with that, I say thank you and goodbye.